So I'm Vaughan with Bill, and we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into the story. So it will be a review, and we're going to examine it perhaps in a bit more detail than you've seen other reviews who talk about it at a reasonable level. Hopefully we'll go a lot deeper. So basic premise of the story. I'll tell you, Bill, when I read this premise on the Kindle store, I thought to myself, that's a brilliant idea. So if you're unfamiliar with the book or you haven't read it yet, the basic premise is in spring of 2003, a pride of lions escaped from Baghdad Zoo during an American bombing raid. If you're very young and you don't know, there was a war between Iraq. There was a big war that went on. Well, we're not going to go into the ins and outs of it, but I guess some of our younger viewers may not be aware of that yet. But I think we can't just assume everybody knows. Lost and confused, hungry, but finally free, the four lions roamed the decimated streets of Baghdad in a desperate struggle for their lives. I think what's really interesting about that second sentence, right, is finally free. And this book really explores that concept of being free. And what does it mean to be free, both from the point of view of a caged animal, but also I think in this particular context, it really talks, to me, I don't know, Bill, if this came across to you as much or at all, was the context of the Iraqi people living under a dictatorship, being free to live under the chaos that ensued post-war. So I don't know if the author deliberately went and did that, but I thought it was very, very clever. And we're going to dive more into the story. But I don't know, did you pick up on that at all? Because for me, I was thinking, if he's done this deliberately, this is genius. If it's done by accident, then it's really a different type of genius.
I highly doubt it was done by accident. Freedom and the concept of what is freedom, that runs throughout the entire graphic novel. And I would be very surprised if you talked to Brian K. Vaughan and he said, oh, I wasn't even planning to do that. I wasn't even planning to juxtapose it with the meaning of, being liberated, by a force coming in to change your government. Yeah,
and speaking of Brian K. Vaughan, so if you don't know who Brian K. Vaughan is, so he's an American comic book and television writer. He has done some, I think, epic doesn't even do justice to the kind of works that he's done. Do you have a particular favorite of his work at all, Bill, or how familiar?
It's funny. I kind of had a love-hate relationship with Brian K. Vaughan because I was a huge fan of Y: The Last Man. And because of that, I tried to get into Saga. And my first 3 or 4 times reading Saga, I couldn't get into it. And I don't know what it was. And then finally, just about maybe a month or 2 ago, I actually read through Saga and I was like, man, this is really good. Finally got into it. But no, probably Y: The Last Man's my favorite. I really like Saga now. I haven't read Ex Machina, and Paper Girls I just started.
Yeah, I mean, look, Brian is he's definitely my type of writer. He is very, very ably partnered by Niko Henrichon. I think hopefully I'm pronouncing it correctly. And I think this is such a good partnership or collaboration because it's not just for art, but we're going to talk about some of the panels and perhaps just try to show a few of our different devices. But the colors, the color palette, how it moves through the story, I think is something else. And I think a good book is always such a really good balance between a writer and the art team. So I think this one really nailed it for me.
Yeah, that was actually one of the things that I had written down was Niko's artwork, and not just the artwork, but especially the color work on this. I love the palette. This image that you've used for the background bright sunny day, the lions have just gotten their freedom, and just a beautiful chapter here.
And what's even, because this panel in itself with a burning sun, and we may think that's a natural lion's habitat, but when you turn the page, it is anything but a natural habitat for a lion. And here the lions, they think they have their freedom, they think this is what they've been talking about in the zoo up until now, but then the reality quickly hits them. And we're going to deep dive into the story in just a couple of minutes. I just want to quickly talk about the publisher. Obviously, we know Vertigo for putting some, I think it's fair to say, some pretty out there work. Vertigo is now discontinued as of, so we're recording this in August 2020. Depending upon which website I got information from, some said it was discontinued in January 2020, and another one said November 2019. But I thought we should just spend a minute or two just talking about some of, why we need publishers like this, publishers who will take on works that aren't your generic superhero franchise story. I think Vertigo, hats off to the people at Vertigo.
Yeah, it's a sad story. I remember hearing when they were going to discontinue Vertigo, and there was a lot of backlash on the internet because of that, because Vertigo was well known for putting out quality work, continuous quality work for a long time.
Yeah, and it definitely attracted a type of reader to them as well, which I think was great because it had a real clear identity as well. So I don't know what DC are planning to do. I mean, the logo is still there on the website, DC Vertigo, but I guess
I had heard, I forget when this was. This is probably a couple months ago. I remember hearing that maybe they were going to bring Vertigo back, but I remember reading, I read about it, and then I never heard anything more than that.
Yeah.
So they might be in the transition to it. I know right now DC is going through a whole shakeup. There were just some There were just some layoffs that were announced this morning, even.
Gosh. Yeah,
but yeah, the nice thing about Vertigo was it was an imprint, but it was under DC. So it had kind of DC's financial backing, but to put out stuff that wasn't Superman, wasn't Batman, just some real good stories that otherwise couldn't be released through DC.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So yeah, I guess there are other people who are going to be on top of the news faster than this channel is, but I'm really excited to see what happens next. And I think with this whole new world we live in post-COVID, it'd be interesting to see what the appetite is from big publishers to continue to put out works like you're seeing here. So reviews. This is a review / deep dive. I thought I picked out these two reviews. So the first one, so I'm just going to move this down here, from Den of Geek. I'll just read it out to you, and perhaps Bill, you can agree, disagree, or give me how far across to the side you are here. This is the part that I took from their website. It's decidedly anti-war, but this is first and foremost a story of a family attempting to find safety. If the lines represent anyone at all, then it's more likely to be those in Iraq displaced by or killed by a war they never asked for. I thought, even before I read the reviews, I think that one shone through for me like really quickly. The second review, oops, sorry, go back a page. I was just trying to move the, there you go, move the Zoom window. From IGN, the Pride soon discovers that outside the safety of the zoo's walls, they are no longer in a position of power. In a sense, the lions are institutionalized. They've lived for so long in the comfort of a cell, they aren't quite sure where to go or what to do. I don't know, for me, that really captured the spirit of these two things. And I've reading quite a few reviews and watched quite a few reviews, but the concept of freedom here, I think it comes through in these two reviews as well, and they don't really know what they're letting themselves in for. Do you think it's something of a be careful what you wish for type of story that happens at the beginning of this book?
It definitely can be. One thing that I wanted to point out with both of these reviews and both these snippets that you picked out, it's interesting because, like I was saying, it's a very light book on the surface, but there's so much going on behind the scenes, so much foreshadowing, so much heavy themes about freedom. And at first, them being institutionalized, the IGN quote down there, I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. It says they've lived so long in the comfort, then it says off a cell. So for the zookeepers, and perhaps there's a second discussion here about keeping animals in captivity, that...
And, I was going to say, and part of that, when they first get this newfound freedom, Safa, who is kind of the older lioness, she doesn't want it.
Yeah.
She just says, hey, go on without me. I'm staying here.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about the characters in this this piece. So, and what I've asked in this page is, I thought, looking at it reading it the first time around, I thought I knew who the hero was. When I got to about page 10 or page 12, I wasn't really sure. When I was on page 20, I thought it was somebody else. And having read through it now twice, and you've read through it twice, I think, as well, I'm not sure who the main hero of the story is. Is it the male lion Zil, who's grown comfortable and fat in his zoo cage, but dreams of one day seeing the horizon again? Is it Noor, the younger female, who's Zil's current mate, who schemes off ways to escape the zoo even before the bombing? So even before the story's happening, she's already talking about freedom and getting out, and she tries to hatch a deal with the antelopes. And because the lions and antelopes are separated by a cage, the antelope feels it has enough power to say no to the lion, which I thought was genius, because it's such a powerful animal talking to its prey, but the prey realizes it is in a position of power at the moment. Nur, incidentally, for those who may not know, is the Arabic word for light. So again, I'm sure Brian knew what these words meant.
I'm sure that was deliberately chosen.
Oh, absolutely.
And I wanted to piggyback on that really quick, because later on, the antelope at first was in the position of power because the cages were there, but that comes back around later on in the story, where the cages aren't there anymore.
Yeah, and then Nur,
lions and the antelope meet.
Well, that's an interesting point. We'll deep dive into some of the story beats. So just quickly, introduce. Do you want to introduce the next two characters then, Bill? Safa and Ali.
Yes. So Safa, like I said, she was an older lioness, and she kind of has a tragic backstory. But she's grown. Yeah. She's grown now to appreciate the zoo, and somebody's there feeding you. You get 3 meals a day. You get everything you need. When they first get their freedom, she doesn't choose to go with them. And then Ali, who's the cub, Ali was, I believe, born in captivity, so he doesn't know about being free like the other 3. And he's inquisitive, impulsive, and I thought he was the most fun character in this.
Yeah, I think that Heir of Naivety also is in Noor's character, because it talks about in the book, she was taken into captivity when she was very young. So she was a cub and she would hunt a rabbit or a hare, as Safa corrects. And that's interesting between Safa and Noor, because whatever Noor says, Safa corrects her. And Noor doesn't like it. And then Safa puts her down in a way that you think you know what it's like out there in the real world, but you really don't. And I felt Zil was kind of like he's had his energy, his raison d'etre just taken away from him now, and he's kind of feels to me as someone who's given up on life. And all he talks about, his memory is of seeing a horizon. And Ali asks, what is a horizon, because they've never seen horizon, because there's cages in front of them, and there's the zoo, and there's walls. So they never even see the sun set properly.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I think that, you know, what is the horizon was kind of an allegory for freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you have a view? Because I kind of have an inkling of who I think. And I think what's great about these types of stories is when you can't, I don't know, I mean, this may or may not be a good thing about a story, but do you think it's a good thing in a story to not actually know, not to be clear on who the hero is? Because everything I've been taught is that's not a good thing.
It's definitely harder to do. One thing with this, with the four main characters, really any one of them could be the protagonist because they all go through a pretty clear story arc. I'd say for except maybe, well, even Ali does, but even the Cub does. But they all go through a story. It's almost an ensemble cast because all of them get about the same screen time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of what I put this little graphic together here. This is, for those who don't know, this is for your classic hero's journey. And I thought this will be just a nice little backdrop for us to talk about the beats of the story and talk about, maybe even answer the question of who the hero is. I don't think we will. we can give it a good shot, and there is a comment section below for people to tell us who they think the hero is. So we've talked about the ordinary world. Before the bombs were dropped, they were in a zoo, they were happy, they got fresh, clean water. And that's quite interesting. When they're free, they go and drink in a lake. And Ali drinks in the lake and kind of like pukes it out. And Safa tells him, the days of fresh, clean water are gone. They're behind you now. This is what salt water, this is what lake water tastes like. But the ordinary world was kind of split into two. Before, the zoo, when they were in, was split into two stages. It was before the bombs, where all the animals kept separately, and after the bombs, where the animals went wild. And out of all of the animals, the monkeys went most feral, I think.
Yeah, that was another thing that's set up a little bit early about Nor and the antelope were talking about just kind of their plan to escape. And apparently, according to Nor, she says, yeah, the monkeys are down, but as soon as the monkeys get out, that is not their plan.
They renege pretty quickly. I mean, this is why I kind of thought that Safa might be the hero, because Heir, so I'm just bringing up the panel. So that's the panel where the cage is open and they have to make a choice, and they have a choice for their freedom, and Safa doesn't go. Safa says she wants to stay in the zoo, and the other three go. But then there's another explosion. There's a graphic. I'm not going to show this image, but it's the one of the giraffe singing about being free, and the next thing, it literally explodes. I don't know what it is.
If you're listening to this, if you're watching this now and thinking, "Oh, this sounds like a great little tale. I'm going to show this to my kid and get it to my small child." Do not get this for your small child. It is. I remember when I picked it up, it was described to me as an R-rated Lion King.
Yeah. Well, so here's the scene, right? The bomb explodes. The lions get sent in different directions. And of course, Ali, the lion cub, lands in the monkey enclosure, and there's a moat, I think, around it, and they're going to scar the monkeys are going to scar the lion cub, and Nora wants to go and save him, but she can't swim across, and she knows the monkeys know she can't swim across, and this is the first inkling of why I thought Safa was the hero or heroine, because she comes out of her enclosure and she pounces from the other opposite angle on the monkeys and pretty much takes them to task and rescues Ali. And then that's her. This is why I kind of feel like this was the point at which she crossed a threshold because she says, "Oh, I can't stay in the zoo anymore. I made a decision." And in terms of a hero, generally, from the way I've been taught this and the way I've learned about this, is the hero is the one who changes the most. And for me, that was the first big change I saw in any of the characters, was Safa saying, "I'm not going, it's not worth it. We are better off living in captivity. The world outside is not worth it." Then she makes the decision, she crosses the threshold. I mean, she could have just not have seen and just let the monkeys scar Ali, but she didn't. So that for me was the first big decision a character makes that wasn't in their hands.
Yeah, and that definitely hits the call to action, and then the first refusal of the call.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean,
definitely hits that story beat.
The mental. Do we think the turtle? I appreciate people who haven't read this book may be wondering what on earth are we talking about, but do we think the turtle could possibly be that meeting with the mental?
Yeah, I definitely think so. So for those who, if you haven't read this, the Lion Pride, they come to a river. They go drink some water. As they do, they get interrupted by this turtle, and the turtle kind of explains that, hey, there's a war going on right now. It's man. You know, the lions are kind of perplexed about this. They say, oh, you know, it's this. You know, what were those bombs going off? And he says, oh, you know, were those the keepers? Because they just call the keepers in the zoo the keepers. He says, yeah, you know, they call them a lot of things: keepers, two-leggers, man. But he definitely kind of just says, hey, you know, this is what's going on. The turtle has kind of a sad backstory too.
Yeah, I mean, just reading the turtle gets 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 full pages about the turtle. And I think the turtle imparts a lot of information. And I think the final page of the turtle, you see the turtle swimming in oil, which again is another clear reference to what happened in a war, that the previous war where they leaked the oil into the sea, or they set the oil fields on fire. And it shows why the turtle thinks the way he does. And he warns them through everything that's coming their way. So meeting of that mentor is actually Safa and Ali. So I think this further backs up my case for Safa being the hero or heroine of this story. Trial and first failure. And now, obviously, not every book, every story is going to follow the exact step, but I'm just trying to follow this around in terms of, I think other characters take on these different parts of the story. So it could be that the lines as a whole are the hero, where each character is taking on a different part. Growth for Safa, I don't think she's pretty well equipped as is. She just hasn't, like she's a hunter. She knows how to do it, Nord talks about doing it, but has never really done it, where Safa definitely has. And it's just her rekindling those, what would you say? Primal...
Those instincts.
Instincts, yeah, absolutely.
But at the same time, too, when she gets a chance, when her and Nor get a chance to hunt, because of her age, she can't keep up.
Yes. And this is the point at which they come into Baghdad itself, and they literally, so this is a shot of what they walk into. It's interesting that there are no humans around. Obviously, I thought what was interesting about this story is, and it's not accurate, this is not a documentary, by the way, but the choice to not have any humans there at all, only in literally the first 2 pages and the last 2 pages, I think, is there any point of humans actually in the story?
Yeah, the living humans.
Living humans, yeah. I mean, there's some dead carcasses which they're about to eat. So they find this dead carcass. So the lions actually turn down food. I think they turn down the food of the antelope, because Noor said, no, we're not going to eat them because I want to prove to them lions have honor. They turned down the opportunity to eat a human carcass. And who is it who actually says not to eat it? It's Noor again, saying, is it Noor who says not to eat them? It's Safa, actually, I beg your pardon, I was looking at a different panel. It's Safa who says, we're not going to eat him. And Ali says, how come? He looks pretty fresh to me. And she basically says, because we would never had those carcasses if it weren't for the keepers. How can you just turn around and make them your lunch? They're the ones who kept us alive. Which obviously wouldn't happen in the real world, but the fact that she actually has values and principles. The other lions are ready to eat the carcass, but she kind of teaches them something. And I think in this regard, she herself is actually leading the way in terms of correct morals, because she's probably hungry as well, but she's actually leading the troop here.
Yeah.
Then moving on, the next trial they have is these horses that they come across. And this time, I think they're hungry enough. They've said no to the antelope, no to the humans, and now's the actual test to see, can they still hunt? And Noor, who's probably the only one who's done any hunting, is now too old, can't keep up, and Safa, who thinks she can hunt, can keep up with the horses, but doesn't actually take any of the horses down.
Yeah, but I think part of it, I don't know how well you can see this. So they had the horses there. They're about to pounce, but actually the hunt is interrupted by an explosion, and that scares the horses and gets them running off. I think if that hadn't happened, if it weren't for man's intervention, they would probably be snacking on horses happily.
Yeah, because it leads to a chase where the horses were stationary, they could have pounced, but now they're actually, everyone's running and they can't keep up.
Yep.
And when they come to this, I'm going to assume this is a palace, perhaps it's Saddam's palace, and I don't know if he had a picture of a lion with angel wings in his palace. But in all fairness, Brian Vaughan does say at the end of the book, he's taken a lot of poetic license. But they give up the hunt and walk into the palace.
Yeah.
And in the palace,
and to be, just to add my 2 cents there, I didn't know whether it was a palace. You can tell when they get there. It's been hit by the airstrike. It's been hit by some bombs, so it's kind of crumbling around on the exterior. I didn't know whether it was a palace or whether it was just a very wealthy, a very wealthy royal and just their residence.
Yeah, I mean, I just turned the screen share off and we can get more.
The interior is very opulent. You can tell there are 3 or 4 stories.
Yeah, I love this top panel of her view of the world as she realizes that there are things out there and they were probably better off in the zoo, where at least ignorance was bliss, because what she sees on the next panels, and again, I'm not going to spoil it all, I would rather you look at it, but there's another example to show that this is royalty on a level I don't think exists in any real world. But indoor pools, and then they come to, I guess, a pet lion, and I think the pet lion, from what I can see, is chained. Again, I'm not going to show this one because this panel is a little bit graphic.
Yeah.
But
he's chained. Looks like he's been abused. Just he's been clawed before. I guess it said somewhere in there he's been declawed.
Yeah, I think his teeth have been taken out, and probably other things, surgical operations have happened to this lion. It's mangy, it's thin, it's blind or near blind from what I can see. Well, in one of the panels, it's just got the whites of his eyes, it's got bruises, and it's got cups, and then we find out what has been beating it. Well, I assume this is what has happened, right? Because there's no actual direct reference to it.
It's left up in the air. It didn't specifically say that. No, I think what we're getting to, it had been doing it. But that lion was definitely beat up. That was a beat up poor lion, man.
And then speaking of the subtext of the different groups this might represent, okay, I mean, I know of that. Well, I wouldn't say I was young, but I perhaps did not know enough about it, and it would need me to do a deep dive and perhaps us to get a actual historical expert on board. You know, if there's demand for that, leave that in the comments. But I think this line definitely is representative of something, and I just don't know what it is, but I'd love to find out, because this is a strong animal. This is the king of the jungle, and it's been just taken down in a way that I can't really describe to you. You'll have to get, and this is what he said, this is for mature readers, right? This is not a kid's book in any way whatsoever.
I don't know the definitive answer for this, but I did think it was interesting contrasting living in captivity as the lion Pride, who had it pretty good, and also, and then living in captivity, but as a pet, who it was said this I think the lion had been forced to fight, and by the end was starving. Someone else had been eating its food.
Yeah, this beast that eats its food, again, I'm not going to show this panel, because if you know this panel, it's, what is this character called?
Yes, I actually had a name. It was, I don't know how exactly it's pronounced. If I'm mispronouncing this, I apologize. But Vaughan?
Oh, right, yes. Yes. And this, I tell you what, I was reading this late at night, and I wasn't prepared. I go into the Kindle guided view, so which basically means every panel maximizes the space on the screen. And I slid to the next one, and this beast turns up. I just had to go straight back into a full page view, because reading it in the dark at night time, yeah, I mean, that I think was the ultimate test. I mean, this goes flipping back to the, I'm not sure that you would describe him as the main enemy of this story, and it'd be interesting to know if there was an anti-hero, because this is a bear, essentially. We'll give it away. I mean, we've given enough away. Why hold this one back, right?
Yeah.
I don't think this bear has been responsible for what our four lions, for the trials and tribulations the four lions have gone through to this point, but now this bear becomes their problem, because this bear is intent on killing one of the four lions for his next meal, because his meals have now gone as well, because the humans are now not looking after him. This other lion that they found is dead. So he tries to kill Safa and Noor, and he's going to kill one of the lion's head. But in terms, does that make him responsible for everything that's happened before, or has he been thrown in there as almost like the big villain? Because in a way, he's an animal who's not doing anything different to what any of the other animals are doing, just trying to find his next meal. And obviously, I think the downfall here is he picks one of our four heroes as his next meal, which by de facto makes him the villain, or a villain, I would say.
And it definitely, I don't think there's a real like antagonist, like a main antagonist. It doesn't turn into being a big bad. It's an odd story. It kind of felt like playing a video game, different levels, and he felt like, to me at least, kind of felt like, okay, this is the boss of this level.
Yeah.
I did pick up with Vaughan there. the other animals are kind of working with each other from the start. The other animals, even if they're antagonistic to each other, like the antelope and the lion, they still kind of work together and have some semblance of civility. Whereas this bear, he's just, hey, I'm getting he's all about himself. And even comes up in just a little bit where the lions, well, I don't know if they work with, but they come up with a plan that involves the horses.
Yeah, I understand what you mean, especially about the part about it feeling not like a traditional story and more like a video game which has different levels. And again, this is not a criticism in any way. There's no rule that says everything has to follow the same narrative structure, which is why I think this book is quite an interesting book. Because when I saw this animal, normally when they have a battle with a big enemy, it's kind of foreshadowed. You kind of the big enemy has been responsible in some way for the suffering of the heroes. But this animal is big enough, scary enough, and I think mean enough as well to be considered their enemy right now. But they could just leave that space. But they decide to take this bear down. I guess they have to for their own lives.
In a more traditional story structure, we would have found out that the bear was like a general, and he was the one sending the military in to send the tanks through and bomb everything.
Yeah. This is for me where I was in doubt as to the hero was, because here Zil is the one who takes the lion down, and he says, as all comic book fights do, is he's having a dialogue with the lion, and he literally says to the lion that I'm a fighter. And that's the first time, I think, in this whole book where he showed any type of what you would traditionally associate with a male lion in terms of bravery and courage and being the king. Up until this point, I felt he was a passenger, pretty much, and he was just kind of going along the path of least resistance. But here, he takes the fight to the bear.
Yeah, no, I thought that was a great character moment, especially because Zil was the one who, he's kind of happy in captivity. He's not like Safa that he wants to stay. He still remembers his glory days, and it's kind of him revisiting his glory days a little bit.
Yeah, and I think in that description we looked at earlier, he was comfortable. He had grown comfortable. He knew both sides of the coin, and he was very happy where he was. And I think that's kind of like the overarching theme of this story is it better to live happily not happily, is it better to live in a way where all your needs are provided for and you're looked after, but without freedom, versus being free, but now you're fending for yourself and nothing is looked after for you? And I don't think the author preaches about it. I don't think he says no, one way is better than the other. He lays it out both, and different people have different opinions, and the four characters have four different opinions on this.
Yeah, with so many stories, there's so many stories that try to just force feed you what they think you should feel. And this was nice that it was left very ambiguous. It was nice that it was left very ambiguous that, hey, they all have different views and they're all kind of valid.
Yeah, and I like stories that provoke a discussion and provoke a dialogue. I think for me, the best books, the best movies are the ones where you, in the case of a movie, are the ones where you walk out of a cinema with your friends, and for me, I don't really know what to say for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then you slowly start to unpack it with them. And I think this is definitely a book that lends itself to that kind of level of deep discussion. And I think so much of it prompted me to ask you to help me try to unpack this and try to figure it out, because I haven't been able to. And it may take me, maybe I'll put it away for 6 months or a year and try to reread it. And it may be just that you've had longer between reads than I have. So for me,
yeah, no,
I'd like to know your opinion.
I like the book. It definitely has a story to tell. I think there's a lot of different levels to unpack in this book, and I think it almost requires to be read quite a few times just to reread through. It's kind of on my list of, it's on my bookshelf, and probably once a year, every 6 months, it's something that I'm going to go back to, because there's so much to unpack just from, and there's little things in there that you don't really pick up on. I mean, we talked about the what is the horizon line? What's the horizon? Little things like Ali, the cub, when he first comes out and they meet the turtle and he takes the drink and the lake water's nasty, he doesn't like it, and then the tanks roll through. That's the first bad thing that's ever happened to that cub.
Yeah.
Just got me thinking, he was in captivity before he said everything spoon-fed to him. Safa remembers, in fact, it's pretty pointedly put out in her backstory, a horrible thing that happened to her.
Yeah.
And how she ended up.
Yeah, that's terrible. When I read it the first time, it was shocking enough. When I read it the second time, and I read the dialogue of the male lion responsible for it, it was even more scary. And that's why she feels. I like the fact that the author took time to explain why she feels the way she does, rather than us just think it's a miserable character who's got nothing positive to say about anyone. But obviously there's a huge graphic nature in that, and I think reader discretion needs to be advised.
And I like that. I like that the ensemble cast, all the characters are fleshed out. It feels like when they make decisions, they're making decisions because it's what they want, and not everybody wants the same thing. So I think it's a very well made book.
Yeah, just meant to skip to the end. So I know you said you had on the whole, I liked it hugely. Obviously, every page I don't particularly think was done as well as it could be. And I had one pet peeve about this, and I know you have one as well that you were going to mention. You haven't mentioned it to me yet, so this.
Are we gonna count down to 3 and say at the same time what our deals are?
Why don't just so we don't get into stereo. This is, I don't know what it is you're about to send. I expect you perhaps.
Yeah, I've purposefully left Farhound in the dark.
Yeah, no, I did try to tease it out of you, but I could tell there was no point in me trying to tease it out of you, because you weren't going to tell me.
Go ahead.
So for me, the last page, so up until now, I thought it's really well balanced about war in general. And I guess when I was looking at other YouTube reviews, a lot of them were from American YouTubers and some were from British YouTubers. And I always have felt, and I think a lot of people on this side of the pond do feel it more than obviously on the other side, is that it's not always whenever you see a war story with Americans in it, the Americans always portrayed as the heroic force. And up until the last 2 pages, I thought it was really well balanced. So again, more spoilers. I mean, you wouldn't have got this far in the video without having heard most of the spoilers already. But the lions get shot by a soldier, and given that we have been rooting for these lions through all of these things, I just felt a little unsatisfied that it was considered a heroic act to, they survived all of these things, and then to just be shot down with a gun. And I think the sergeant or the lieutenant or whoever the leader of the platoon is, says, "You're right, son, you didn't have a choice." which is probably true, but it felt to be, it had that Spider-Man thing to it, you know, it's like all of these things, and then there's a red, white, and blue spangled banner there, and then he'll go fight the Green Goblin. And I just thought that last page, it could have ended without the soldiers being seen as a heroic force at the end. So that was my pet peeve with it. I don't know, was that the same as you, or did you have a different?
You know, I thought that I was fine with the tone of the soldiers. The way it's put up is they said, you know, whoever's commanding here, and they don't. One thing that's nice is they don't really personify these people. You don't see their face. Exactly, yeah, you don't see their faces. You just see kind of the aftermath of what happened. And he kind of gives the South Park. Well, it was charging right for us.
It was, in all fairness. I mean, what else could they have done? But
yeah, and I don't think they were portrayed heroically. My biggest complaint or issue that I have with this is, yeah, that we've been following these lions throughout their whole time. They finally find little Ali finally finds out what a horizon is. They're going through, and then just all of a sudden in two pages it's over. I don't mind a protagonist or group of protagonists dying. It was just, and this is one thing that I've heard online from online criticism about it, was that it's a very abrupt ending, which is kind of true to life. Because you could have a protagonist the whole time you're watching his life, and then he could just die of a heart attack, which is true to life, but doesn't make for good fiction. The ending just felt very abrupt. This book almost feels like a part one. Like you'd find out after this one, if there was a sequel, Ali wakes up and then, you know, tries to get his revenge. Yeah, and obviously it's not that. That's not what that book is about, and that's one thing that BKV Brian K. Vaughan, the writer, he's not known for doing cookie cutter stuff. But yeah, it ends so abruptly.
Yeah, it's like we never really got a chance to. I think there's just literally, this is the only page where they have actually found what it is they were looking for. It's a beautiful page, and I'm not going to go through the next page because again, it's quite graphic in nature.
Is that a horizon? And they see the horizon, and kind of like they find their freedom, but they don't get any time to enjoy it.
Yeah, it's literally those three panels here. She says, "Was it worth it, older man, for this?" He looks at it, and straight away the bullets come flying in a space of 3 panels. But who am I to criticize a master with his work? I think I'm just going to end it on this last panel, because I think that is after the actually there was one panel here, right? After they die, and again I'm not going to show this, but there is a bird, a crow, I believe.
Yes.
At the beginning of a page, which you referenced actually in our little pre-chat, and I'm just going to scroll through. So this is the first page. There's a crow, and I know you can't read it very well, but it says, "The sky's falling, the sky's falling," and all it says is "the sky's falling, the sky's falling." Then on the last page, go right to the end. I know you've got the paperback version, but I'm just going to zoom in on that panel, right? So put it this way so you can see it. This is the last panel of story, and there's a crow flying again, and the caption says that they're free. And thinking about that concept of freedom, it's fairly bleak to say the only way you can be free is to die and get rid of this misery of this world, because they were miserable or happy in captivity, depending on your point of view. And I don't think there's much debate upon their misery and their struggle in what people would describe as freedom, and it ends on they're free when they're all dead. So if that's your kind of book, then this is right up your alley, I guess.
I will say I absolutely love in scripts, callbacks, opening image, closing image, kind of as bookends. And I loved that ending coming back to the crow, because the very first panel is that crow saying, I don't know if this is the same crow. My head canon is that this bird is the same bird that was at the very start.
Yeah. And that's interesting.
That is in my head. Yeah. I don't know if Brian K. Vaughan has ever said that is true. But I just love that, hey, it starts with a bird, it ends with a bird. There's so many little things. The bird ends up landing on that statue. That statue was actually talked about earlier in the book as well.
Yes, you're right.
Was described by when they met the turtle.
Yes. And that bird...
And actually, I love stuff like that.
Yeah, the bird is in the last 3 pages. Yeah. It's there, it's free, and the bird is actually the only thing that's perhaps already free, including for humans, whichever passport the humans hold. It's actually the bird who comes and delivers the story and ends the story. And I think this is another, again, I don't know, to me, some people might say that's really heavy-handed, right? In terms of juxtaposition. It is, but some of this book is meant to be heavy-handed. Some of this book is I think, is deliberately antagonizing in some ways. And for me, I love that kind of stuff. It's subtle, but it's really sharp, and it's really pointed, and it really grabs you. Then it will play with your psychology a bit more until you drop your guard, and then it will grab you again. And I think there's at least 4 points in that book where the book literally grabs you by the throat.
And don't let my criticism of the books stop you from reading. Pride of Baghdad is a good book.
Yeah.
Just that's the one thing that stands out to me that I say, hey, I don't like this part.
So this has been really great, Bill. I hope we've provided a lot of value to you, the viewer. If you want to find us out more about us, or perhaps if you've come through my mailing list, you already know about my website. If you don't, the website is comic.digitopiafilm.com. I explore a lot of concepts, a lot of themes that are similar to this book, Pride of Baghdad, which is a big reason why I decided to make this video. You can come read the first 18 pages for free on my website. You can download a free art book, which will get you onto my mailing list, and be alerted to cool content like this. Bill, I believe, actually, before we go into your Kickstarter, just tell us about the book Kinetic, and then I'll ask you about the current campaign you have on.
Yeah, absolutely, Vaughan. So as we said at the beginning, my name is Bill. I'm the writer and creator of a book called Kinetic. It's a independent superhero story. And here's kind of the main pitch. Imagine that you're developing superpowers, but your city already has a hero. That hero's kind of a jerk. He doesn't really care. So you think you can do a better job. And it becomes kind of a superhero turf war. I kind of describe it as The Boys with a more optimistic worldview and a lot less gore. This is something that if you have younger kids, I rate it T for teen, but I mean, it can be enjoyed anybody, 9, 10 plus. But yeah, feel free to check it out. I'm going to be running a Kickstarter. You can check out the Kickstarter is going to be live when this goes live. And you can check that out at www.kineticcomic.com.
And kineticcomic.com will redirect to the Kickstarter page, which at the time we're recording, you don't have the URL for yet, but I will also stick that into the description. When does the Kickstarter finish, Bill?
The Kickstarter is going live on August 14th, and then we are going to run all the way until September 12th.
Okay, so hopefully this will come through with enough time on that Kickstarter. And thank you so much, Bill. Just one last question for you. You also run a podcast called Under the Mask, and I know in that podcast you don't do book reviews as such, but you do talk to a lot of creators about the process. Do you want to just quickly give a quick plug for your podcast, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not doing reviews yet, but we'll see, man. I kind of like doing this review, so maybe I'll start putting that more in. But yes, I'm also the host and creator of the Under the Mask podcast, where we discuss the super process behind superheroes. It's a real cool podcast. I bring on comics creators. I've had Vaughan on in the past. He was episode 11.
Yeah.
And now we're all the way up to episode 20, I believe. By the time this comes out, it'll probably be 21 or 22. We just bring on creators, talk about their process. We've talked with comic professionals and everyone from writers to authors, artists, anyone who does anything with comics, we'll bring them on. And we're looking even to branch out to do more people in the creative field, maybe not necessarily doing comics.
Oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, no, I really enjoyed being on your podcast, and I listened to it on my morning workouts. Amongst other podcasts, yours is definitely, it's on my favorites on my Stitcher app. So yeah, do look it out for that. Check out Bill's Kickstarter at Kinetic Comic. Check out my book, Digitopia, comic.digitopiafilm.com. All the links in the description. Thank you so much if you've watched it all the way through to this point, and really appreciate your viewing. Please leave a comment, please leave a like, and I think it's almost mandatory now that you have to ask people to hit subscribe and hit the bell notification. Whether you hit the bell notification or subscribe, thank you so much. And yeah, if you like this content, let us know. And Bill, would you, if people want to see more of these kind of deep dives, I'll put it more than a review. I'm not saying I coined the term deep dive, but I feel we've done far more than a review would have done. Would you be up for doing another one of these if there's appetite from the audience?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's like a review and a half almost, because it's not just a review, but you're also going that little bit more.
Brilliant. Well, I really enjoyed it, and hopefully we'll do more of these. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. And yeah, check out Bill's sites, check out mine, all links down below, and we shall see you in the next video. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for having me, Vaughan. Guys, have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.